There is a kind of quiet that lives inside a man who has swallowed his grief for long enough. It doesn't look like peace. From the outside, it probably just looks like stillness. I have been that kind of quiet for 5 years, since we buried my wife in October. And if you have never watched a quiet man reach his absolute limit, let me tell you, it does not look like an explosion. It looks like a door closing very softly. That is what I kept thinking about, standing at the international arrivals level at St. Pearson, watching two plainclothes officers from Hamilton Police walk my 22-year-old daughter through the terminal crowd with her hands cuffed behind her back. Her friend, the one with the red highlights and the voice that carries like a fire alarm, spotted me standing near the baggage carousel and screamed across the terminal, loud enough that strangers waiting for their luggage turned to look. "What did you do to her?" I didn't answer. I watched the automatic doors open, and I watched my daughter disappear through them, and I watched the doors close again. Welcome to Dad's fierce revenge. Pull up a chair. The people in these stories had every chance to do things differently. They just kept choosing wrong. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I think you're going to want to stay for this one. Let me take you back 4 days, because you need to understand what got us here, and I promise you, it isn't what you're expecting. I'm 63 years old. I spent 36 years as a licensed electrician out of IBW Local 105 in Hamilton, Ontario. I retired 2 years ago, though I still pick up the occasional contract when a builder I trust needs someone who knows the work. My hands are calloused and my knees ache in the cold, and I drive a 2011 Ford F-150 with 212,000 kilometers on it that I have no intention of replacing. I live in the same house I bought with my wife in 1991, a brick semi-detached on the East Mountain, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave from their driveways, and your neighbors know your name. My wife Helen died of ovarian cancer 5 years ago, 8 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I won't go into the details of those 8 months, because some of you already know that kind of time, and some of you don't, and I hope the second group stays lucky. What I will tell you is this. Helen wore a gold locket every single day of our marriage, 31 years. It was a Victorian oval locket about the size of a 50-cent piece, passed down from her grandmother, who had brought it over from England in 1952. Inside, a photo of the two of us on our wedding day, cut small and fit carefully behind the glass on one side, and on the other side a photo of our daughter as a newborn. 3 days old, eyes squinted shut, fists up by her ears, looking like she was already mad at the world. Helen was wearing that locket the morning of her last good day. After the funeral, I unclasped it myself gently and put it in a small cedar box that sits on top of her dresser in the bedroom. Every evening when I come home, I go upstairs, open that box, and look at it. Sometimes I take it out and hold it in my palm. The chain pulls around it, cool and fine, and for about 30 seconds she is back in the room with me. Then I close the lid and go downstairs and make dinner. That Tuesday in October, I came home from a 3-day job in Ancaster, went upstairs, reached for the cedar box. It was lighter than it should have been. I knew before I opened it. The locket was gone. The chain was gone. The box was sitting right where it always sat, but it was empty, and the emptiness had a weight to it that the locket never did. I stood there a long time, staring into that small cedar box. The bedroom was quiet. The house was quiet. Outside, somebody's kid was bouncing a ball on the sidewalk, and that sound seemed very far away. I checked the drawer below the dresser. I checked the closet. I checked the fireproof lockbox in the basement where I keep the important documents. I was checking the way you check for your car keys when you already know you left them on the counter. Going through the motions, because stopping means admitting you already know the answer. There is only one other person with a key to this house. I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the noise behind her before she even said hello. A bar, music, voices, the particular high-pitched laughter that happens when people are on vacation and think the whole world is as uncomplicated as they are. Hey Dad, kind of in the middle of something. Where is your mother's locket? Silence. Then too smooth, too practiced, what are you talking about? The gold locket, from the cedar box on the dresser. It's gone. More noise in the background. Someone calling her name. She said something back to them in a muffled voice, like she was covering the phone. Then she came back on. Dad, it's fine, don't make it into a whole thing. Tell me where it is. I needed money for the trip. You said no. I found another way. Her voice had gone flat, the way it did when she thought I was being unreasonable. It's old jewelry. It was just sitting in a box. I stood in that bedroom for a moment with the phone against my ear. Just sitting in a box. The locket that her mother wore every single day for 31 years. The locket with their photographs inside it. Just sitting in a box. Did you pawn it? I'll replace it when I get back. There's a vintage jewelry place on Lock Street that. Did you pawn it? A pause. Then quieter, Dad, I have to go. We'll talk when I get home. She hung up. I stood in that bedroom for I don't know how long. The ball bouncing outside had stopped. It was very still. I want to tell you I felt rage. I didn't. Not yet. What I felt was something older and heavier than rage, like something in the floor of me had given way. Then I went downstairs, got my keys, and drove north toward the lower city. I need to back up, because none of this came out of nowhere. Nothing ever does. When Helen passed, my daughter was 17. She took her grief like a match dropped in dry brush, fast and hot and burning everything it touched. Every argument was about something that wasn't really the argument. Every silence between us felt booby-trapped. I understood it. I kept telling myself I understood it. And because I was terrified that being firm would cost me the only family I had left, I stopped being firm. For 5 years I caught every fall before she hit the ground, and I told myself that was what a father did. When she was 19, she enrolled at McMaster. I helped cover tuition, not all of it. I am not made of money, but a significant amount. She lasted 14 months before she decided the program wasn't right for her. I didn't argue. I told her to take her time, figure it out. I swallowed the money and the lost year and told myself it was fine. She moved into a one-bedroom in Westdale. I co-signed the lease. When her hours got cut at the restaurant, I covered the difference on rent for 4 months without being asked twice. When she needed a new laptop, I bought it. When she needed first and last and didn't have it, I found it. I told myself it was temporary. It never was. She called me on my birthday twice in 5 years. I called her on hers every single time. 3 weeks before the locket disappeared, she called and asked me for $1,100. A girl's trip to Punta Cana with 3 friends from her old residence floor. She had been hinting at it for a month. When I said I couldn't swing it right now, my RRSP contributions were behind. The furnace had just cost me $4,000 in September. It genuinely was not a good time. She called me controlling. Said I didn't want her to be happy. Said her mother would have understood. She hung up before I finished my sentence. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd come around in a week the way she always did, and we'd pretend the fight hadn't happened. And I'd find some way to help her anyway because I always did. I had no idea she was already sitting in her apartment looking up pawn shops in Hamilton on her phone. I had no idea she had already decided that if I wouldn't give her what she wanted, she would take something I hadn't offered. It took me 40 minutes to find it. Hamilton has no shortage of pawn shops. There are a dozen of them between Barton Street and King William, and I drove every one I could reach. At the third shop, I saw it immediately through the glass, a display case near the front, laid out on a square of dark velvet between a man's wristwatch and a silver bangle. My knees went soft in a way I hadn't felt since the day a doctor sat me down in a consultation room and used the word malignant. The owner was straightforward about it. A young woman had brought it in 4 days ago, gave him a valid Ontario photo ID, and signed a statement of ownership. He had given her $650 for it. He pulled out the intake form without me asking and slid it across the counter. My daughter's name, her face on the photocopy. He said he had no interest in keeping stolen property once he understood the situation, but under Ontario law, he couldn't simply hand it back across the counter. If it was stolen, I would need to file a report, and an officer would have to come in and verify ownership before any property could be released. He locked it in a back safe while I drove home to retrieve Helen's original appraisal documents. Documents her grandmother had kept with that locket since 1963, and a receipt from the jeweler who had cleaned and reclasped it in 2008. The detective who arrived an hour later was thorough and unhurried. He cross-referenced the hallmarks and the maker's stamp in my documents against the locket itself. He took my statement standing at the counter. Then he set his pen down and asked me a question I had been expecting since the moment I walked into that shop. He said my daughter's actions constituted theft over $5,000 under the criminal code, based on the appraised value, plus false pretenses on the pawn shop intake form. A hybrid offense. If charges proceeded, she would have a criminal record. She was 22 years old. Was I certain this was the direction I wanted to take? I had been thinking about it for 6 hours by then. I had thought about it the entire drive north. I had thought about it standing in that empty bedroom staring at a cedar box that weighed nothing. Yes, I said. He studied me for a moment the way a person looks at a decision that cannot be unmade. Then he nodded and said he would have officers at Pearson when her Air Canada flight came in Sunday afternoon. He shook my hand and left. I drove home with the locket in my jacket pocket, against my chest. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. A light snow had started, the first real snow of November, the kind that doesn't stick but makes everything look like it's considering it. I sat there and thought about Helen, and about what I was doing, and about the difference between protecting someone and funding the version of themselves they haven't earned yet. I went inside and put the locket back in the cedar box, exactly where it belonged. Then I went downstairs and made soup, because I hadn't eaten since breakfast. On Saturday afternoon I made the mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake, maybe some part of me needed to see it, of opening Instagram. There she was, pooled deck, turquoise water, a drink with a paper umbrella in it. The caption read, finally exhaling, "You have to fill your own cup first." Posted 40 minutes later. My daughter with her friend Tamara and the others, all four of them with their arms around each other, laughing at something off to the side, golden afternoon light making everything look like a post for someone else's life. While I was sitting in Hamilton with her dead mother's locket in my jacket pocket, my daughter was posting about filling her cup with money she got from emptying mine. Here is the part that surprised me a little. I didn't feel guilty looking at those photos. I didn't feel a flicker of doubt. I felt something closer to a door clicking shut. The quiet kind. The kind that's final. Sunday moved slowly. The detective sent a text at 2 in the afternoon. Flight on schedule. Team would be in position near baggage claim. I did not go to Pearson to make a scene. I went because I needed to be there. I needed to stand in that terminal and prove to myself that this time, when she looked for me to step in front of it, I wasn't going to step in front of it. I stood near the back of the arrivals hall by a support pillar, and I watched the board flip her flight status to landed. At 4:20, she came through the international doors, tanned, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, rolling carry-on behind her, saying something to Tamara that made both of them laugh. She looked the way people look when they believe they've gotten away with something clean. 2 officers stepped forward. They said her name. She stopped smiling. The shift in her face happened in less than a second. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like the ground going out from under her. The cuffs went on. Tamara made a sound like she had been struck. She spun, found me by the pillar, and screamed it across the arrivals hall loud enough for half the room to hear. What did you do to her? My daughter found my face through the crowd. Dad, please, tell them it's a mistake, please. I kept my hands in my pockets. I didn't move. I watched the automatic doors open, and I watched her go through them, and I watched the doors close. She called that night from the detention center. One loud call. Of course it was to me. I almost didn't answer. I sat there watching my phone ring on the kitchen table, looking at her contact photo. A picture from the Christmas before last, back when she still smiled at me like she meant it. And I answered on the 4th ring. Dad. Her voice was raw in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. Dad, you have to come and get me. You have to tell them you gave me permission, please. They're saying this goes on my permanent record. Dad, please, I can't tell them that, I said, because it isn't true. I'm your daughter. You are, I said, and I have failed you. Not by saying no to the trip. I failed you every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time I let you treat this house and me and your mother's memory like a resource to draw from whenever you needed something. I kept telling myself I was being a good father. I was being a coward. I was so afraid of losing you that I forgot what I was actually supposed to be doing. If this goes on my record, I lose everything. My job. All of it. I'm not coming to get you, I said. And I'm not calling a lawyer. You're going to sit in there tonight and you're going to think about what you did. And when you get out, you're going to start dealing with what comes next. You're supposed to protect me. I am protecting you, I said. For the first time in 5 years, I actually am. She was crying hard when I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, not doing anything in particular. I thought about Helen. I thought about what she would say if she could see all of this. I think she would have cried. I also think she would have understood, because she was the one who used to tell me, back before any of this, back when we were just two people trying to figure out how to raise a daughter right, that love without limits isn't love. It's just fear with a kinder name. The legal process moved the way it moves. My daughter spent 2 nights in custody before a bail hearing. I didn't post bail. Her roommate eventually did. Some young woman I had never met. The charges proceeded. Her employer, a medical clinic on King Street West where she'd been doing reception work, found out through the local paper. She was let go before the month was out. Tamara went quiet within a week. The others from the trip faster than that. The young man she'd been trying to impress with the whole trip, someone she'd mentioned once and I'd never met, sent exactly no messages after the story spread, which tells you everything about what that was worth. She came to the house 3 weeks after the arrest. I saw her walking up the driveway through the front window, wearing the same winter coat she'd worn to her mother's funeral 5 years ago. She tried her key in the door. I had changed the locks the Monday after the arrest. I opened the door before she could knock. On the porch beside me sat a large suitcase and 2 boxes. Everything of hers still in her old bedroom, packed and zipped. What is this? Her voice had gone very small. Your things. I have nowhere to go. You'll figure it out. I kept my voice level because I had already said the important things on the phone and I didn't have it in me to say them again. You're 22. That's what 22 is for. Dad, she was crying now. This isn't fair. Your mother's locket is in a cedar box on the dresser. It's staying there. The phone plan, the credit card I co-signed, the first and last I covered for the Westdale place, all of that is done. I should have made it done a long time ago. That's on me. She stood on that porch for a long time. She was waiting for me to take it back. I had taken things back 100 times before. Every line I had ever drawn in front of her, she had known, because I had taught her, that I would eventually erase it, because I was so afraid of losing her that I would sacrifice anything before I would sacrifice the feeling that she still needed me. I picked up the larger suitcase and set it down in front of her feet. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door and turned the deadbolt. I did not watch her walk down the driveway. I had earned that much. That evening I grilled 2 pork chops on the back deck, the little 2-burner propane thing I have had since 2009, the one Helen always said took too long to heat up properly. She was right about that. I stood there in the November cold and let it take its time, and then I sat in the patio chair and ate slowly, listening to the neighborhood settle into evening. Kids 2 doors down still outside past dark. A blue box rattling somewhere down the street in the wind. The particular sound a Canadian city makes at the end of autumn, when everything is finished and waiting for snow to cover it properly. After dinner I went upstairs. I opened the cedar box. I took the locket out and held it in both palms. Chain pooled in my left hand, locket resting in my right. I opened it. On one side, Helen and me at our wedding, 1991. I am sweating through my collar. She is laughing at something just off to the left, not looking at the camera. It is the best photograph of her that exists. On the other side, our daughter, 3 days old, fists up by her ears, ready to fight everything in sight. I sat there a long time. I thought about what I had believed for 5 years, that if I gave enough, absorbed enough, made myself small enough and patient enough, she would stay close. That the love would eventually come back in a form I recognized. I had thought I was building something by staying quiet. I was building someone who didn't know consequences were real. I closed the locket gently and set it back in the cedar box. I closed the lid. I didn't feel righteous sitting there. I didn't feel like I had won anything worth celebrating. I felt the way you feel when you finally put down something heavy you have been carrying so long you forgot it had a weight to it. Not good, exactly. Just lighter. The way a room feels when you open a window that has been painted shut for years, and the outside air finally comes through. She pawned her mother's locket for a vacation she posted about online. She called it filling her cup. She came home in handcuffs. And I got back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Not just the locket, though I am glad to have that too. Something in myself. The part that knew the difference between love and fear, and had finally stopped pretending they were the same thing. I closed the bedroom door softly behind me and went downstairs. For the first time in 5 years, I slept straight through until morning. If this story stayed with you, go ahead and hit the like button. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And make sure you're subscribed. There's more where this came from.